Hello everyone, welcome to another video of mine which has been on the back burner for a few months now, and until now, I decided to make a video on it. This was supposed to be made way back when cross save came out for Warframe, but I never had the time to start the video, so only the script was finished, and has sat. My main goal in this game is to collect/obtain every Warframe possible, which leads into this video. For me, the main reason why I got into Warframe is because of the Warframes. They're all cool looking, they all look amazing their own way, and the fact that there's so many of them to obtain, build, and use is the best part. There are repeating ones of the base version like Primes and Umbra, but I don't mind it. It just means there's more of a grind, more variants, and better versions of the same cool frames. On to the main idea of this video. I like to see more Warframes in Warframe. Besides the usual base frames being added every now and again, and making a prime version of an older or an existing one that hasn't gotten a prime yet, there needs to be more in my opinion. By the way, this video contains slight spoilers about gameplay and story, and is mainly for those that are endgame. Otherwise, enjoy. For starters, we have the low tier Warframes. We can add a Dex variant of Warframes. Dex is usually a limited edition weapon or cosmetic that gets added to Warframe every time there's an anniversary of the game. However, this time, these Warframes aren't going to be limited, but here to stay, and will be more of a helping hand in the game. They're going to be worse than the Prime Warframes, but be better than the base version. There'll be a render right here that will have a GUI similar to the Nightwave, where it shows the missions below and above will show the progression of which Warframes that are left and have been collected. Every time a new player completes basic missions and tasks that introduce them into the game, the vendor will hand over them the Warframe parts necessary to building the full Warframe, that being the main blueprint, the chassis, the system, and neural optics. And it does not give a Warframe slot, so players will still have to buy more Warframe slots if they want to get more Warframes, and to build them it'll take basic materials. So what about the current or existing or veteran players? They'll just have to do the same tasks and the same process will occur, unless those missions have been done and they can instantly claim them. What benefits do they give? They give slightly higher health and shields depending on which one they're most biased, or both. A little bit more mana capacity, and they'll look different compared to the basic version. They're not going to be reskins, they're going to actually look different compared to the normal, or prime counterparts, or any other variants that I'm going to list later on. Just like how prime warframes actually look different compared to the base variant. They should all have their own custom and unique designs, and all the following should too. Another easy way of adding more Warframes to the game is by having each faction syndicate within the game have a faction variant Warframe. It will be another incentive for players to try and play every faction syndicate for a new reason besides mods and weapons. It will be similar to the Dex variant in terms of specs, but still worse than Prime. The main benefit of these faction variant warframes is when players use them, it will increase the amount of rep gained after a mission for a faction syndicate, which cuts down on the grind for reputation for a chosen faction syndicate. And again, when players need reputation fast for a faction, they'll just choose any of the warframes with a matching syndicate. Each of the faction syndicate warframes will have their own custom-made version for each specific faction that the variant names follow. For Steel Meridian, sorry if I mispronounced, the variant will be called Vacor. For the Arbiters of Hexus, the variant will be called Telos. For Cephalon Suda, it will be Synoid. For the Parent Sequence, it will be Sakura. For the Red Veil, the variant will be called Rakta. And finally, for the new Loka, the variant will be called Sancti. And the way these players obtain these warframes is by leveling up the chosen syndicate. So when players join a chosen faction syndicate, at rank 0, they'll get the main blueprint for all the warframes for that faction. And at rank 1, players will be able to purchase the rest of the parts for each warframe, each part costing 2,000 faction rep. In addition, two small yet unique variants of warframes that can be added is the Mara and Seti variants. The Mara variant was a single weapon called Mara Detron, and was sold by Baro Katir, and the Seti variants came out during random operations in Warframe. However, this time we'll have an interesting way of getting them. There can be a mini The Circuit game mode where the gameplay and reward system is basically the same. It will consist of two difficulties, the base version where players can acquire the Mara variant, and the more difficult version where players can obtain the Seti variant. Each week, just like the circuit, players will choose between 3 warframes to grind for, and there will be 10 tiers of rewards that players will have to go through. And at tier 2, players will get the neural optics, at tier 5 the chassis, at tier 8 the systems, and the final 10 tier main blueprint. And of course there are rewards in other tiers, but mostly low level items, but this is where it changes. Instead of having a random selection of warframes and weapons at the start, just how the circuit works, players will keep their chosen loadout of choice because it's a lower and more basic version of the game mode, and the tileset will be somewhat similar to the circuit tileset, but changed up to match the colors and look of the Mara and Seti variant warframes. The overall stats will be the same. However, the Mara's having slightly more either health, shield, or both depending on the warframe, and Seti variant will have the same health as Dex and Faction, but more mana amount and mod capacity. Now onto the topic of Carmine variant, which only came out in one weapon variant, that being the Carmine Penta, and is obtained by playing Empyrean missions, which are railjack missions. Now sure, not everyone likes railjack missions, however we can give them at least some kind of real reason to play them. We can do this by adding low-level mirror defense mission that will contain these new Carmine variant warframes. They're going to be better in stats than all the rest that I've previously stated. This is the last low-tier warframe that will be added, but it's still worse than the Prime variant. The game mode will rotate between a single warframe every day. After each round, players will have a chance of getting one of the 4 warframe parts, or other stuff from the game like relics, mods, some other low tier arcanes if needed, and some other stuff. The play area will have more carmine colored theme and of course will make the players traverse between different proximas and defend against hordes of enemies. There are also specific fragments given out at the end of the rounds, similar to how Citron's Balric and Raina work, except it will be a single currency and will be a compensation to the player if they're unlucky in getting their Warframe drops. Players will be able to buy the parts for whatever remaining Warframe they have and need at the vendor that will be located in any of the relays. Moving on to the mid-tier Warframes, and the difference between these and the low tier is that these are better in stats in every way, no dir. However, they're much harder to get. We're starting with Mutalis and Proboscis, which to be honest I don't know what to do with, since Mutalis is an upgraded infected version of a weapon, and Proboscis is an enhanced version of a Mutalis weapon. So we can kill 2 birds with 1 stone in adding 2 different warframes that can rely on one another. And when acquiring the Mutalis variant, players can upgrade to the better version being Proboscis, after completing certain requirements. However, I haven't come up with a cool or unique way of getting these warframes, so I'm just going to leave them like this and say that their stats are better than the ones before and move on to the next variant warframe. Second mid-tier warframe, the Prisma variant. Prisma weapons and cosmetics are usually sold by Barakatir. However, if we were just to simply sell these semi-decent warframes, there wouldn't be much point on grinding the warframes before it, because the Prisma warframes are so much better and easier to get. So instead, Barakatir will sell beacons similar to the abyssal beacons that the Syndicate faction sell. A single beacon will cost 5 ducats. The mission will be very similar to Abyssal Zone, where the player or players had to carry an Oricon Defexo, and it will feature a Prisma variant and will have a new negative effects to the player. The map will have a similar layout, but the colors and atmosphere will be changed to fit to the Prisma style. After completing the mission, players will receive a certain amount of Prisma currency, which a specific trader, let's say Barakatir's follower, will be located at any relay and will accept that new currency. Every week, there'll be a rotation of 3 different warframes that players can go after. So let's say the first week is Excalibur Prisma, Vabian Prisma, and Octavia Prisma. Each of their 4 parts needed to craft will be sold at different prices. For example, Excalibur's main blueprint might cost 10 Prisma currency, while Octavia's main blueprint will cost 25 Prisma currency because she's a very strong warframe. And Vabian's will cost, let's say, 15. Players will be able to obtain all warframes for that week. They're not limited to only getting a single warframe. The stats of Prism will be better than the Mutalis and Proboscis. The second to last mid-tier warframe variant, the Vandal variant. Players will have to play Elite Sanctuary Onslaught. The warframes will also be on a weekly rotation, offering 3 different warframes each time. After each round, depending on the rarity of the part, players will have a chance of getting the part of the warframes that are available for that week, and some Vandal currency. If a player is unlucky and for example gets a relic and a Vandal currency, they can have a pity system with Cephalon Samaris, where he also offers the current week's Warframe parts and previous. So for example, if a player didn't get the chassis blueprint of Octavia Vandal, but had a decent amount of Vandal currency, they could go to Cephalon Samaris and buy the remaining part for let's say 25 Vandal currency. The stats on Vandal will have better stats than Prisma. The last mid-tier Warframe variant, the Wrath variant. Once again, I can't come up with a cool or unique way of getting this variant of Warframe, since many of the weapons or cosmetics of Wrath variant is either sold from Barakatir or obtained through special operations. So I'll just say they have the best stats out of all mid-tier Warframes and move on to the last tier of Warframes. Getting into the first 2 of the high-tier Warframes, these are the Tenet and Kuva. The acquisition of both the Tenet and Kuva variant Warframes will be the same and similar to how players get the current Tenet and Kuva variant weapons in the game. When a player vanquishes their sister or lich, they'll have a chance of getting a Tenna or Kuva weapon. These Warframes will function the exact same way. They'll have a chance of being dropped by either the sister or lich depending on which one the player is going for. They have the same benefits and stat bonuses as their weapon counterpart, and will be more Warframe oriented. Now, I'm not sure if it's blueprints that you get from the sister or lich, but if it's the blueprint, then players get the blueprint of the Warframe and just use special parts to make it, or if they just get the entire weapon for free made, then so be it. The same with the Warframes. They just get it automatically, free Warframe slot, and they'll just have it right away. Moving on to the Incarnon Genesis and Zarman variant Warframes. These can easily be implemented into the game. With Incarnon Genesis, they can be added into the circuit where players could choose either to go after Incarnon Genesis weapon or Warframe for that week. It'll work the same way, just now players have a choice of either weapon or Warframe. For Zarman variant, players will gain a new Zarman currency after completing Zarman bounties, after which they'll go to Cavallero to purchase the Zarman variant Warframe parts to then craft. Each week it will rotate between 3 different Warframes that he has for sale. Players can obtain all 3 that he has for sale. Now we have our third and second to last Warframes, because we already have the concept of Umbra, and sure, Excalibur Umbra is supposed to be only one frame, be the whole reason for all these other frames exist within the story-wise, and replacement for Excalibur Prime, which I'll never let go of because I really want him badly to complete my collection. However, I feel like we can further expand on the idea of Umbra frames. The acquisition should be significantly harder to get, and should prove to others that if you have a certain Umbra or Umbra Prime frame, or all, you have done the most difficult and most grindiest activities that Warframe has to offer. The first step on how we can add more Umbra Warframes is with a simple quest. Let's call it Umbra Origins. Players have to complete a few requirements before unlocking it. First, they need to complete the Sacrifice quest. Then they have to complete the entire star chart, and final requirement is having the Steel Path unlocked. And to note quickly, from my understanding, Steel Path is kind of useless at the moment. Besides getting increased loot, slightly different mods, higher level enemies, and rare arcanes, we can find a better way of utilizing this endgame and or New Game Plus game mode. Steel Path can finally have an importance and use to it. When players complete the first mission of Steel Path, they'll get the new Umbra Origins quest. When completed, it fills in on more lore of Umbras, and will reward 10 Umbra Lab and more Umbra blueprints of the original Warframes, that being Ash, Ember, Loki, Mag, Rhino, Trinity, and Volt. It also contained the Excalibur Umbra Prime blueprint. Before I say how players can get the rest of the parts, there's more requirements in getting these new Warframes. Since they're going to be the best of the best, they have to challenge the player to the full extent. Firstly, players will have to be a minimum of MR 15 to be able to use both the Umbra and Umbra Prime Warframes. Secondly, they need Steel Essence, which is obtained from Steel Path as players play the Steel Path missions. Blah, blah, blah. This will allow to craft the final whole build of each frame, replacing Orokin cells. Now, in order to acquire the rest of the Umbra frame parts, players will play the same missions as they would in the normal star chart, but now it's going to be in Steel Path. So for example, if someone wanted to get Rhino normally, they would go to Fossa on Venus, which is the Jackal assassination mission, until they get the necessary parts. However, if someone wanted to get the rest of the parts of Rhino Umbra, they would also have to complete that mission, but in Steel Path. If it's for a frame like Volt, where it requires the normal Tenno lab to get the rest of his parts, players will build a new Tenno Umbra lab within the dojo. Now to get the rest of the parts of Umbra Prime frames, players will need to obtain Umbra relics, which can be found or rewarded from missions within Steel Path. And just like the usual relics, players will have to get Void Traces in order to upgrade them, and get higher tier parts that they want. And if players wanted to open their Umbra relics, they'll have to do Steel Path version of the Void Fisher missions. This whole concept of Umbra and Umbra Prime stuff could just as easily be applied to anything else within the game, like the weapons that the frames come with, arc-wing, etc. So what benefits do these new Warframes give? Every frame will get a new special ability similar to Excalibur Umbras. For example, how Excal works, when a player goes into operator mode, the Warframe becomes sentient. However, they're all not going to be like that. They're all going to be unique. For the following changes and features will all apply to the new Umbras and current Excalibur Umbra, which will be changed to make it similar to the rest. We would need to add a little bit more health and shield to each Umbra frames. That'll make them better than the previous versions. Besides having Umbra polarities, we also need one extra mod slot. So not including the Aura and Exilis mod slot, instead of having only 8 main mod slots, we only have an extra one, making it to 9, which also increases the mod capacity. Umbra Primes will once again increase the health and shield to make it better than the Umbra counterpart, and will increase the main mod slot by 2 now instead of 1, making a total of 10 main mod slots. The final high tier Warframe. We can also make use of Requiem Relics to make Requiem Warframes. The current rewards of Requiem Relics are kind of boring in my opinion. Kuva, which can be gotten through Kuva Fortress missions and some other ways, Riven Silver, which has an increased drop chance and other ways of obtaining, have been added, and specific Requiem mods which can be kept in the loot pool but they'll become more of a bronze reward and sometimes can be a silver and gold reward depending on how good they are. This idea of having an even better tier of relic can once again allow us to make the best possible Warframes, being better than the likes of Umbra and Umbra Prime versions, and the ones before it. Before acquiring one, there's once again more requirements that players have to do before being able to get them. First, players have to be a minimum Vampire 20. Second, they have to complete all the missions on Kuva Fortress and Steel Path. And finally, you have to complete Umbra Origins quest. Now, to get the relics, players will have to be able to get them from Kuva Fortress in the base version, the Star Chart, but once it comes to unlocking the relics, players will have to do the Steel Path version of the Requiem Fissure. And the last and or bonus of Warframes that I would like to be added is the Acolytes, or in other words, the Stalker and the rest of the Rogue Warframes. Stalker's main blueprint can be obtained from the Stalker's Beacon that Barakatir sells, which is then a one-on-one boss fight. Now, before getting to the rest of the parts, there's once again requirements. Players have to have completed the New War quest. Then, the rest of the parts can be acquired, which can happen when players kill him whenever he invades their game. To get the rest of the Acolytes, in similar fashion to Stalker, players will have to go to Barakatir, buy the specific Acolyte Beacon they want to do, then they'll have a chance of getting invaded by random one and Steel Path missions, just like Stalker, and get the remaining parts after killing them. To give a final and quick rundown of where each variant of Warframe will be. We'll start with the low tier, that being the base, then we have the Dex, then the 6 Syndicate factions, then Mar and Seti, and finally Carmine. With the mid tier we have the Mutalis, the Proboscis, then the Prisma, then the Vandal, the Wraith, and finally Primes. Moving on to the final high tier, starting with Tenet and Kuva, then Zariman and Incarn Genesis, then Umbra and Umbra Prime, and finally Requiem. With a bonus of Acolytes that I don't really know where to put, so I'm just going to say they're there and call it a day. Otherwise, this was meant to be a video that shows off we can have many more Warframes in the game. I am no endgame player, as you can see by my level, and as I said before, I only go after Warframes, so it's mainly to have bigger ambitions to go after, and well, to provide more of a reason to play the game, and if its benefits for the overall game. I'm not just randomly requesting Warframes to be either put out or simply given out, without any real intentions or purpose. I try to come out with some sort of a reason to go after and come up with cool and unique ways of obtaining them. And it's a fun way of making the game feel like there's much more to do. Anyways, thanks for watching, have a good one, see ya.